Hello, everybody, and welcome to YWCA Dayton. It is our Gym City Earth Tones. YWCA Dayton has this new series, YW Mission Moves, and out of these series, there are several different types of series that will come out of this entire programming, but this particular one is so special because it's right here, hitting the heart of home, looking at the Gym City, looking at the different issues of race and racism and how that shows up in our health. And how that shows up in our health goes so far from the color of healthcare to mom voices and maternal health care, suicide and suicidal awareness and mental health. And now we are speaking today about the impact of food apartheid. Check this out. Greetings and welcome again to Gym City Earth Tones from YWCA Dayton. YWCA Dayton is something that is a staple of our community. We have been here since 1870, and we have been rooted in eliminating racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. We do that through being the only domestic violence shelter in Montgomery and Preble County, as well as creating programming that surrounds our community with the way to use their voices by teaching and education, by advocating for them, and by helping individuals learn how to utilize policy and legislation to make change. We do a lot of things to impact change here in our community, and we're so grateful to partner with Gym City Market to be here in the Gym City Market community room discussing race and health, and talking specifically today about food apartheid and what food apartheid is. I am so grateful to have some wonderful guests here today to speak with you. I'm so excited to introduce them and to share them with you, as they are so much a part of my family, as much as part of my community, and important, influential individuals of the community. And so we're very excited. My name is Taylor Curtis, and I'm the Advocacy Manager at YWCA Dayton. I am excited to be here as I came from Sinclair Community College, one of the youngest Black females tenured in the history of the country, and leaving that position of Black studies and Black psychology to get hands-on in the community where I can impact, advocate, and teach and educate how we can be advocates for ourselves. I'm grateful to be here as part of this programming, and we're very excited about what we have up today. I'm going to share a video that gives you a little bit of insight into what food apartheid is. And I believe this is an important topic for us because we have to understand how food connects to our health.
Bank of Southeastern Virginia and the Eastern Shore is working to bring attention to the connection between racial equity, hunger, poverty, and wealth.
People of color are disproportionately impacted by hunger, and that's been in large part due to systemic racism.
The nonprofit organization hosted a racial wealth gap learning simulation as part of Hunger Action Month. It's meant to be an educational tool for people to understand how structural inequality has impacted people of color over hundreds of years.
Some folks like to use the phrase pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. That is a very difficult thing to do when you have laws and policies that have been working against people like that look like you or people of color for centuries.
The simulation focused on 13 key policies from sharecropping during the Reconstruction period to more recent policies like employment discrimination and redlining that have negatively impacted land, money, and opportunity for people of color.
Simply feeding people will not end hunger. It will end the sensation of being hungry for the moment. It is not a long-term solution to ending hunger.
The food bank says the long-term solution is to enact policies and practices that provide equitable access to resources and support.
Your legislators also need to hear from you and understand that we have a voice in policies that are passed, and that's one of the ways that we can help impact circumstances for the community at large.
Because equity ultimately creates stronger communities. Kofa Lasaki, News 3.
Looking for a new job can be stressful.
In looking at food apartheid, you'll hear other terms like food insecurity, you'll hear terms like food desert, and what that means is that there's an absence of access to food in a way that it should be for the amount of people that are in that location. And we see this as an issue, especially within communities of color. Why? Why is it such an issue in communities of color as opposed to worldwide? Well, worldwide in communities of color, we always hear terms like third world country when it's talking about an area that doesn't have the resources necessary to sustain the amount of people that are in that area. So we're going to talk today about how we got to this point where we're seeing food apartheid. And what does the word apartheid mean? And why would we call it food apartheid beyond the words food insecurity? We're also going to talk about how lack of access to the food that you need impacts health and mental health, especially within communities of color. Today, we have a wonderful guest that's going to be with us. Speaking to us today is Dr. Vanya Lewis Thornton. Dr. Vanya Lewis Thornton is the Director of Black Studies at Sinclair Community College currently. She's also a professor of history, and she has worked diligently in this field and has a lot of experience in unpacking the history of our nation as well as the history of communities of color. And so we welcome today Dr. Vanya Lewis Thornton.
Thank you. You know, one of the things that you said, Taylor, was that it used to be called, I shouldn't say used to be, sometimes it's referred to as food deserts.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the term food apartheid much better. And the reason is because when we say food desert, deserts we find naturally in our environment. Mm-hmm. Apartheid is a man-made, structural, socio-economic system that was designed to separate people and to relegate people to a second-class citizenship. And so when I think of the phrase of food apartheid, it seems so much more appropriate because these food apartheid areas, it's designed. I'll stop there. It's designed. And, you know, we find the roots of this food insecurity in the institution of slavery. Mm-hmm. You know, when the slave masters gave their leftover scraps of pork to their enslaved people, mm-hmm. Where gardens were allowed that provided minimal subsistence for those who were enslaved, where people had to figure out things like, and I say figure out, I give much credit to the ancestors that came from Africa that came with ingenuity and creativity that said, we're going to make the best of this. Mm-hmm. We didn't ask to be in this situation. We didn't come here as slaves. Right. You know, I hate when my students say, they brought slaves to the Americas. No, they didn't. They brought free people to the Americas that they enslaved. And that when we think about the diet of those who were enslaved, they were given things like pig feet, pig ears, pig brains, pig head, guts, things that we call now soul food.
Yeah, chitlins is on the market, especially this week, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. And but one of the things is that when you think about the hard work and the hard labor of those who were enslaved, they worked it all.
Yeah.
I don't know about anybody else, but I sit at a desk most of my day. I'm not very active. And so for me to eat high calorie food, highly salted foods, highly seasoned foods. I mean, the seasonings are good because they added flavor to the scraps that they were given. But when I think about that, what our lifestyles are today, we no longer have a lifestyle that warrants us eating in the way that they did when people in this nation were enslaved.
Right. Survival.
Absolutely. And so when we've got to make adjustments to the way that we eat. And I'm the first person that says I have to make some adjustments in the way that I eat. I tried being a vegetarian for a short period of time, and then ham came to the table, and it's like, yeah, I don't think so. That was a good idea, Vanya, but I don't think so. But that we have to make adjustments that match our lifestyle today. And it's only when we make those adjustments that we can maybe rid our communities of diabetes, high blood pressure, cancer. Because we have a propensity in our communities, in low economic communities. And the funny thing is, and I know that we're talking about predominantly urban and Black communities, but there's some similarities that go with poverty.
Yes, absolutely.
And so when we think about what it is we put in our bodies, we were having a conversation earlier. I'm kind of regressing in the conversation, and please forgive me for that. But we were talking earlier about that our bodies, our God, forgive me, our Creator, however it is that you want to refer to the master who put this all in motion, gave us everything that we needed to live a healthy life. We kind of messed that up. We messed that up with excessively salting our foods, frying our foods, eating to an excess. And then when we think about how it is that in the institution of slavery transcends to today, it transcends to today to McDonald's.
Yes.
Popeye's chicken. Does Church's chicken still exist?
Yes, it does.
Church's chicken. Okay.
And now they got Cane's and Chick-fil-A.
Absolutely. And so, we have been relegated to have to fight for our survival, for our healthy survival. And I love this Gym City Market. I love that there was a concerted effort by the community that said we have to put healthy foods into our community. I love that idea because there used to be a McDonald's across the street, and there's a Popeye's chicken up there. And all of them have really cheap menus that make it really easy
Yes.
to feed your family. But that's not nutrition. And we've got to understand that there's a connection between the racist policies that brought people, human beings, to this nation and to this hemisphere as enslaved, and the fact that we have food apartheid in the 21st century. There's a connection there. And we have to recognize the connection is racism, systematic racism that says these are people who are not worthy because of income, because of the color of their skin. For whatever reason, these are people who are not worthy of living healthy lifestyles. And we have to be proactive to take that out of the hands of people who mean us no good, and make the adjustment ourselves, seek out ourselves what we need in order to survive and to live a healthy lifestyle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, everything you said, we can pick it apart piece by piece and really spend like another 3-4 hours going into the depths of that, because what you said is so profound, is that as people, we were forced into survival for the reasons being, racism, poverty, et cetera, et cetera. We were forced into survival and then forced to adapt into this survival mode. And that even, I'm thinking, I just went to go see my grandmother in Virginia, and that's the South, and it's Southern cooking, and that's what it is. And to know that salt curing food was a thing of survival, it's going to preserve it, it's going to make it last, and this is what we do. And then to recognize that pattern from there to soul food, because that's still what they're cooking right now, that's still what they're eating right now. Every time we go home, there's a ham every time. And to know that I go and visit, so I go home and get a little bit of it in moderation, but the family members that live there, you see the physical impact every time, because then you start to see the family riddled with diabetes, high blood pressure. Hypertension is why high blood pressure, but then you see issues with cardiovascular disease and other heart issues. And then you tend to hear that be the common thread when you go to the doctor and talk about your family history, but it's not genetic.
It's not genetic, absolutely.
And that I don't think I knew until probably learning about food apartheid, when the conversation became like a major thing.
Right. It's not in our DNA, but it is in our DNA if you consider DNA being community as opposed to our physical DNA. But it's not in our DNA. And, then you make it difficult for people to have access to health care. And we've got people who are arguing against universal health care for people in this nation. You've got people who have, I'm sorry, I'm going to start preaching.
I mean, you're telling the truth.
You think about people who voted against things like expanding Medicaid, and people who wanted to overturn the Affordable Health Care Act, which they call it the Affordable Health Care Act now, but we don't call it Obamacare anymore, because people have become used to it and embracing it. But they make it difficult for poor people and people of color, to have access to good health care. And so take all those things, take all those bits, put them together. We're denying you good food, which adds to bad health, but we're not giving you access to health care. to good health care. I mean, think about them closing Good Sam up the street.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you've got Grandview here, but really, really,
Right. I mean, we imagine, I grew up on that side of town. I was born at Good Sam.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of time that it takes to get to the hospital from one area of town to the next hospital is a huge gap. And if you're in an emergency that you need like immediate medical attention, I know individuals who didn't make it because it took that long for the ambulance to get there, or because it took that long to get to where you needed to be. And that was something that was just like in the community, you're aware of it, and it's the trauma of knowing that I may not get the immediate medical attention that I need, the mental health trauma that comes from that. That's intense. And to know, in addition to that I'm now eating things for convenience,
right?
Because it's cheap, because I can get it at Dollar Tree, but then not to realize that those things might be expired. There are studies that show that there are more things that are already expired at those types of stores that we tend to access without even knowing.
Just grab it off the shelf.
There are conversations about how there are sometimes things repackaged after it shouldn't be repackaged anymore, because they're just trying to get it off, because money, right? And so when you look at all of those things, like you said, it's a combination for bad health. And then you wonder why we see a higher rates of COVID in Black and brown communities, or why we see women who have the gender wealth gap, the racial wealth gap, and then the aspects of living in a community that is underserved, and then all of the things that go along with that, and then the additional medical needs that a woman might have, and the reproductive needs a woman might have. Like, just the whole combination of it all, it's very intense. But often I don't think we put those things together. I don't think there's many conversations about how these things are connected. And so I think that it's so necessary, and I appreciate what you've shared with us.
Thank you.
I want to also bring to the table.
And I'm going to back out so that you can see me.
You're fine if you want to, because we're going to get into this panel here soon in a second. So this is Amaha Selassie. He is president of Gem City Market. He is the co-executive director of Co-op Dayton. He's a professor of sociology, and we are so excited to have him here. Thank you for being here.
Good, thanks. That's my privilege. She was my professor. So,
we went to school together.
Right. And this is reminding me of when we used to have our show. What's really going on? It's been our first time on video in a while.
Just for old time's sake at the end,
True.
But we're glad to have you here because you bring a very unique voice to the table. Being president of Gem City Market was a birth of the community that you're heavily involved in. You were heavily involved in the birth of this project, kind of leading and guiding the voices of the community in how to make change. And so I want to hear from you a little bit about how this came about, what you saw happening here regarding food apartheid here in the community, and how it came to be.
Cool. Yeah. Boy, I wrote down so many notes from what Dr. Louisville said. I got 1,000 points on what I hop off on, right? But kind of origins of the market itself was during 2015. There was a report that came out looking at opportunity, and opportunity was conditions favorable for the attainment of a goal. And Dayton is hyper-segregated, so we have 98% African Americans that live in Dayton live on the west side, 94% are white, live on the east side, with the Turkish community, Latino community, and African refugee community. But what was distinct was that the river became the dividing line for opportunity, right? Which reminded me of W.E.B. Du Bois, the first African PhD in America, that said that the problem of 21st century is the problem of the color line, right? And so now, like, I started realizing that the color line is now translating as the opportunity line, right? And so there was some meetings that took place. There was one that really stuck out to me was a meeting at Omega Baptist Church where we let the community know the information that, like, and so we showed them these maps that showed all of West Side was underdeveloped. Like, all of West Side was considered low and very low in opportunity, right? When it came to housing, access to food, transportation, access to parks, right? All the social determinants of health, right? Those things that are like the undergirding factors of health. And so from then, and it wasn't new knowledge. It wasn't like the West Side was like, oh my gosh, we live in an area that's underdeveloped, right? But it was like, yo, now we got data that was produced outside the community, right? It was Montgomery County Public Health plus the Kerwin Institute of Ohio State that reinforced our lived experience. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So then it was like how to go forward from there, right? And so a group came together because we realized that food access was a huge problem. At the same time that report came out, another report came out that said that Dayton as a whole was second in the nation when it comes to food insecurity, right? So all these things kind of combined together to help build the market. And in all honesty, at first we thought we were gonna get the Kroger's up the street and be done in a couple of months, you know what I mean? We had zero grocery store experience amongst us, right? But we realized it was a bigger issue, and the more that we did research, we realized that we need to find a location that had density and this, that, and the other. You know, I kind of want to talk about this notion of, so when we first started talking, we used the language food desert, right? Mm-hmm. Like Dr. Lewis said, it implies natural phenomenon, mm-hmm. and all these things, right? I think we shifted our language to food apartheid for an important reason, that we wanted to show human agency. Mm-hmm. Right? Because if it was imagined, if it was a design, then we could reimagine it, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that connects to hope, because to me, hope is the ability to transform our lived environment, to know that we have power, right? Power being like the ability to achieve purpose or the ability to transform the area around us, right? And so oftentimes in areas that have been intentionally underdeveloped, right, we have a sense of hopelessness, right? That we're always at the whim of some wind that's blowing in our community, instead of realizing that we have the power, right? And that we are the ones we've been waiting for, right? And so we wanted to change the language to realize that like this was designed, and that we can undesign it, we can redesign it, right? Like what is the thing that we want to work, live, and play in? What does the environment look like, right? Mm-hmm. How we leverage our resources towards making it happen, right? So how do we build collective hope in the community, right? And so that was kind of the main reason, because now there's book deserts and there's healthcare deserts. They use desert to imply this like natural thing instead of calling it what it is, right? And so, you know, and it's not even that current structures are necessarily like intentionally reinforcing it, but they're not intentionally unimagining it, right? They're not saying like this is where we're at. Because really when we're looking at, you know, I'm a nerd, I'm a sociologist, and so structure equals ideology plus resources, right? So I have an idea that could be completely false, right? Mm-hmm. But I can put my resources towards it to make it real. So when we're looking at redlining, right, we're looking at this notion that white was superior, and then I'm gonna put my resources to pull concentrated advantage in some areas and concentrated disadvantage in other areas, which over time has led to these opportunity gaps, right? Or even risk, right? Like who's bearing the risk in the community for the things that are there. So when we're looking at food, right, in the Dayton community, we're looking at, you know, there was 40,000 residents, no full service grocery store. Mm. You know, like you had to take 2 buses to go to Kroger's, or you had to go to the corner store, which, you know, if you're working 2 jobs, whatever, once in a while, it is what it is. You know, I do it too. You know what I mean? But when it comes to like every day, when I'm taking a grocery cart full of food to my house that is full of canned goods, this, that, and the other, then it's like, how does that impact my health? Yeah, it's more expensive, highly more expensive, right? You know, $1 for 1 banana. Yeah. You know what I mean? So how does that impact, right? And then But you said something interesting, right? That like when we're talking about the connection from a period of enslavement to now in the health, and to me, it's like how are we reimagining Blackness, right? Like we've had this diet. Right. And I'm not even for food shaming. You know what I mean? Like people are going to eat what they're going to eat, but I want people to be conscious of how these food impacts them, that they can make a choice. You know what I mean? If they want something different, you want less sodium or this, that, and other. Because, you know, we ate for survival. And to me, opening up a grocery store in an area that has food apartheid is also about survival. And that's what makes it different from other things, right? It's like the community saying we're not waiting for Superman. And we're going to self-determine our own destiny, our own access to fresh fruits and vegetables. Like I remember the day that this market opened, I was like, man, I don't know when the last time a mango was sold in this area. That shouldn't be some like huge phenomenon. But you know what I mean? But it was. I was like, dang, that is so crazy. That's why my Facebook has, well, I love mangoes too, right? But it's like, you know, like it's on my, it's just like, man, you know, and so, so the interesting thing when we're looking at food apartheid, right, is that like we're talking about food, but actually like, you know, even how you know, gender, race, class, age, and sexual orientation all impact our human experience. You know, food or food apartheid is just one aspect of an interconnecting web that creates concentrated advantage, concentrated disadvantage. So to me, food is like the canary in the coal mine, right? Because when you're looking across the country, right, areas that have been redlined, right, are 3 times more likely to be a food swamp, meaning excessive, you know, Popeyes and all the things that are deleterious for our health. And then you're 3 times less likely to have the grocery store, right? And so that's a systemic issue. You know what I mean? And so so wherever you have that canary, you also going to have high levels of mass incarceration, lower housing quality, right? All of these things are also going to be present, right? Absolutely. And so it's like, so seeing how all these things are part of this interconnected web, and then how can we make a dent? How can we make a difference, right? And how do we control the narrative, right? Because to me, it's like the narrative informs how we relate to each other. The narrative informs how we understand our lived environment. So how are we controlling our own narrative? So like, again, when I was talking about reimagining Blackness, that's again about how we're controlling our narrative. How do we define ourselves? How do we define health for ourselves, right? And connecting, like I appreciate how you connected it to poverty as well, right? Because, you know, if it's Latino community, you know, First Nation, right? Poor white in Appalachia, you know what I mean? Like all of these things are prevalent, you know what I mean? And so like connecting the economy is I think a huge piece, you know, in it. So, you know, the grocery store can serve, Gym City Market can serve many functions, right? So we have 80% conventional, right? Because we want to meet people where they're at. We want to make sure that people that have limited disposable income can get the products that they need, right? And then we have, you know, some organic, some we got 3-tiering price system for all of our products, but we also got a teaching kitchen because we want to learn how to cook. You know what I mean? Foods in different ways. You know, people from different countries and different recipes can come and share it with the community. You know, we got Chef Thomas, who does an amazing job inside there. And, you know, our GM is a master chef, right? So she's been holding classes and holding it down, and everybody's excited about that. We also have a health clinic, right, where we can get some of the basic needs met, some diagnostics, right? Pretty soon, there's a program called Moms at the Market on Tuesdays, right, where we have doulas and ones coming around to give wraparound care for either new moms or expecting moms, to build that sense of community, right, and that sense of power working together. And then we have this community room, right, which can be used for organizing, it can be used for the Wise podcast, right? And also just a way to build deeper connections, right? Because we understand that like health is not just our food, but it's social. There's a political aspect to it, right? Where like 80% of health outcomes are actually place-based, right? That's why your zip codes determine life expectancy.
Yes.
Right. But another aspect of health is our level of connectivity,
Yes.
right? Our deep relationships. So
Absolutely.
we want to have a space, known as a third space. So you have your home, your work, and then where do you go in community that you have that deep sense of community, like Cheers, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
When Norm walks in the room, everybody yells Norm, right? 'Cause everybody knows your name, right? And so how we build that deep sense of connectivity, repair that social fabric in our community, right? That we can continue to co-create our shared future together, right? Because to me, it's a misnomer, or it's really an imagination or an invention to say that we're independent, right? Because we're interdependent by nature.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And not just humans, but with the whole environment, right? And so how are we restoring that sense of like stepping into what actually is, and I think COVID has shown us that, right? Or Ubuntu, I am because you are, right? Or King calls it a single garment of destiny, that I can't be all that I can be until you are all that you can be, right? Like how we all impact each other, right? So how do we live that out? How do we create spaces to do that? So this community room, I think serves that function, right? Because even, in developing movement, right? Movements move at the speed of trust, right? And so how are we building those deeper relationships to build the trust to enable the community transformation that is necessary? And food is one of the easiest ways, right? Because everybody agrees that, kids should have access to food, elders should have access to food, right? And that like we deserve to have the option. Now, if you come in here, we got Oreos, we got different stuff, if you choose to do that, great, but you should have the option,
Right.
you know what I mean? But when you go to the corner store, you don't have option, you know what I mean? It's just, I gotta take these things, right? I'm thankful for this conversation. And one thing that you said, that like, I would like to add something too, if we talked about the DNA, because you say it wasn't our DNA, but kind of is in our DNA, like culturally,
Right.
But because of epigenetics, it kind of is in our DNA, right? Because once that stress changes the DNA, it takes 2 generations. You know what I mean? So part of what we're struggling right now is that like oftentimes we're trying to solve by dealing with individuals and individual decisions instead of talking about the structural implications, right? The structural racism that is perpetuating these things that makes Oprah Winfrey, with all the money in the world, more likely, to have a miscarriage or Serena Williams or whatever, regardless of income, right? Because of coming from a household that struggled early on, you know what I mean? And so
and then despite all her wealth, despite all her fame, once she had her child and she had difficulty,
it didn't matter.
It didn't matter.
Yeah.
She was a
black woman.
She was a black woman that was
whose voice is often undervalued and not validated.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So and I know you try to move on,
No,
but like to me, I think the key is, right, like when we're talking about the narrative development and the reimagining, is that like we have to control our own knowledge. We have to create our own knowledge, right? Like it's not like, oh, these people can validate or whatever. No, like what is the knowledge stemming out of our community from our lived experience, right? That we're sharing and common out. Because sometimes we think that it's just me instead of realizing that multiple people are experiencing the same thing, right? But then how are we reimagining knowledge and validating our own knowledge or our own experience to then use as a vehicle towards our own liberation? You know what I mean? Like to give us our North Star of like how we want to get out. What is the community that we want to work, live, and play in, right? And that was another thing that I appreciated about the market, was it brought East and West together.
Yes.
So some of our organizers in the beginning until now we're on the East side. You know what I mean? So like it was a community coming together to work for the benefit of the community, to realize that there's power in the local, there's power in a big box store is not going to come in and save us. You know what I mean? That we got to do it ourselves, right? And so it was a way to heal some of these historical wounds, right? That we can move closer to that shared future, or acknowledging the shared future and co-creating it together. 'Cause I used to say, building a shared future from divided past, but really we got a shared future regardless. You know what I mean? It's just our determination, if we want to move across artificial differences, right, to really acknowledge our full humanity and then move forward. So,
come on and say artificial differences, because that's exactly what it is. And so when you created this idea of race and created this idea of gender and created all of these social constructs, and then pack in all of these rules that align with this creation, and then now force us to live in this artificial reality, right? Where now we are bound by rules that are not tangible and by things that really don't exist.
Right.
And if it was as simple as changing your verbiage or changing your phrase or change, it's literally words that we're grappling with here, and yet lives are being impacted. People are dying, people are sick, and people are passing on this intergenerational trauma, and it's a physical thing that we're seeing impact as well as the mental health thing, as well as, you know, how you're then passing on legacy and how you're then taught and then how you're socialized and then how you're raised and then how you then continue to pass on or continue to cycle because of the perspectives and because of the falling in line that takes place.
Internalized oppression.
And it's internalized. And so often I don't think individuals see themselves in it. They always see everyone else, and we can point out, you didn't do this and you didn't vote for that. And, you know, we tend to see where everyone else is, but not see how we perpetuate it, not see that it is up to us to remove it from ourselves as well as remove it from our community. And so we always hear people say, well, that's not, you know, my job. Well, it's your job to take care of you. And if you're not connected in, if you don't see how you fit into the picture, if you don't see how you can be a part of the solution, and if you're still refusing to even get involved, then you're still a part of the problem. You're still contributing to the cycle. You're still maintaining the status quo and maintaining that equilibrium of power that exists for those who are white or for those who are affluent, those who have had, you know, certain levels of privilege based on where they sit socially, whether they're male or whether they're this or whether they're that. And then those individuals then get to maintain this power, and we don't ever flip the switch. And that's because people don't see themselves. People don't see how they can contribute. So again, they're waiting. They're waiting for someone to come, and where's the next civil rights leader that's going to come and change the community, instead of recognizing that I could just go shop at Gym City Market and be a part of that change, or I could get involved in other spaces and other ways. And we're going to talk in a little bit about how to get involved. Go ahead, Vanya. I see you had something on your mind.
Well, no, you mentioned voting, and I'm going to take this subject a little off skew, but we've got to remember that who we elect locally is a heck of a lot more important than who we elect to national office.
Yes.
And we've got to get, you know, we're complaining about, rightly so, things like gerrymandering. But we have to become very proactive in who it is that we elect to be our local city commissioners.
Yes.
All the way up to the president of the United States. So anyway, I'm sorry. That was just a side.
No, that's huge, because when you have individuals that are speaking on behalf of your community and you have no voice in which individuals get to speak, then you're choosing to, you know, throw your hands up and accept whatever comes, and not often realizing that it's also intentionally designed the way that it's difficult to access voting. And so when you decide on that Tuesday, you're not taking off work because I can't afford to take off work and I don't have time on my lunch break, and then I gotta pick up the kids from daycare, and then all of a sudden now that's a day and oops, I didn't vote, which happens all the time.
Too much.
Right? You have to be intentional, like, well, let me vote in advance, let me get an absentee ballot, those types of things. But we're not aware that the voting place and the way that it's set up and this and that it's going to be all these barriers. And so a lot of times there are people who are still expecting to experience the world the way other people experience the world without considering where they sit. And so you don't consider where you sit. You don't consider how where you sit matters so much, because some people have a seat where their voice is a little louder than mine. And if you have a voice that's louder than mine and you raise it up with me, what could happen? And then some of us just need to know we have a voice. you don't
Right.
realize you have a voice at all. And so now that
Right.
Tuesday went by, you didn't vote, and it's like, oh,
Right.
it's
Yeah,
all right.
you know,
It doesn't matter.
I think that's a good point because I think part of this work is for everybody to realize that they have a voice, you know, that they have experience, you know, and you know, I know there's things of like giving people platforms, like you know, you're giving us a platform tonight, you know, so thank you, right? But also, you know, oftentimes I think like people don't understand like the power of their voice and like how to create spaces for them to activate it, right? So like this, the market's a co-op, right?
Yeah.
So we believe in participant democracy, right? Like we have 5,000 members. Each member has a vote. Each member has a say in the direction of the market because they're a part owner of the market, right? So instead of being recipients, we're owners or leaders, right? Of our direction. And so like when it comes to being in the community, you mentioned like voting on the local, right? It's like people really realizing their power that they have individually and collectively. And one thing that you reminded me of is that like, you know, like Dr. Lewis, she said, be the change we want to see in the world, right? Mm-hmm. And so to me, it's like that thermostat versus thermometer conversation, right? You know, because you know this room is kind of in between right now, kind of going all over the place. Right. Like, you know, if we want to change the temperature, if we're talking to the thermometer, it's going to be like, you know, it's whatever degrees it is. And I'm like, we need it hotter or colder. Like, that's nice. You know what I mean? Right. I agree. Whatever, you know what I mean? But the thermostat, you know what I mean? I want at this temperature, it goes to that temperature, right? Yeah. And so it's like how we realize our power to be the thermostat. You know what I mean? And not pointing, you know, because my biggest lesson in life was when I stopped pointing my finger and waiting for others. And I realized, okay, so like, how bright is my light shining, right? Am I the invitation into the world that I want to see? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, am I showing what is possible? Because oftentimes, the more we see what is possible, the more that we can step in. Like was it Roger Banneker in the 4-minute mile, and everybody's trying to run that 4-minute mile, and then the same summer he do it, 2 more come after. You know, because we saw what was possible. Yeah. So like to me, like all of this project here was just to crack the door of what is possible and what we can do together as a community. Because at one point this seemed impossible, you know what I mean, or seemed crazy, and all of these things. We're gonna steal the money or whatever, you know what I mean, all these things, right? But it's like now there's hope that you can feel it, like it's tangible in the air. You know what I mean? And so it's like, okay, so how do we continue to build hope? How do we realize our power? How do we utilize our gifts and talents? It's called asset-based community development, right? Knowing everybody has gifts and talents. So, right, how are we connecting by our talents? Because that's what creates opportunity. When we bring gifts together, opportunity emerges, right? And so that's why I love cooperation so much, because that's how the process of creating our own opportunity, instead of like waiting for someone else to create opportunity for us, right? How we do it amongst ourselves by seeing ourselves that we are the ones we've been waiting for, you know? So I'm thankful for these times, and food is a crucial part in that, right? And are connected to land, you know, which also comes directly from food, right? Because it's like what we're putting in our bodies, our health. Like was it Audre Lorde that said, you know, self-care is the most revolutionary act you can do. Absolutely. And my wife is on me constantly because she's like, you know, you're doing too much. You know, you need to take care of yourself and all these things, and I'm learning a little bit more. I got a sister that's been on me about that too. You know what I mean? And I'm learning a little bit more. Shout right? out to the wife. Because, you know, over the long term, you know, if I'm going to be in this race, you know what I mean, 40, 50 more years, you know what I mean? Then I got to take care of yourself.
Yeah, that's again something that we see, especially within underserved populations. You find underserved populations often in job positions and life positions where they are serving or taking care of everyone else. And you see that historically, right? Where the only jobs you could get were to serve and take care of other people. And so when you see that, what you see is that individuals know very well how to take care of others. And they do that for survival. And they're so caught up in it that when they have time or have the opportunity or need to do it for themselves, they can't. Right. They don't have the energy, they don't have the strength, or they don't have the motivation. And I mean, imagine, and now I'm getting into my psychology mind, right? Imagine correlating and associating and conditioning yourself to see service and see the things, you know, cleaning, cooking, taking care of, nurturing, to see those things being done for someone else and relating that to a job, relating that to a requirement, relating that to something that you have to do. So when you finally get a break, you don't even want to do it for yourself. You don't want to do it within your community. You don't want to do it because you're tired, you're exhausted. And even the mental health aspect, that's why we see so much cellular memory that connects us to the trauma. We see intergenerational racial trauma. We see trauma of the oppressed in many different groups that are oppressed. And we see that trauma passed on, and we see our trauma responses, right? I think about food and trauma responses, and think about when we see certain ways that parents teach their kids about food, or certain ways that parents have had to navigate their food. I think about right now the millennial generation especially. So parents who were in populations where they didn't have the money that they needed, they often made meals that lasted for long periods of time, right? You got beans and cornbread for a week, you get this casserole for a week. It's designed to save money because you're not, making new meals. Well, now the generations who grew up like that are in this place going to all of the fast food restaurants and door dashing and Ubering their food every day, me being one of them, right? And I noticed that in the process of this pandemic, in the process of being, having a lot of responsibilities, working long hours and all the things. And I got to a place where for my health, my doctors told me I needed to rest. And I literally had to choose, do I go grocery shopping and get groceries, cook a home cooked meal with nutritional value and clean after cooking,
Right.
or do I go to work?
Right.
Because I had to rest. So when am I going to rest? And so during that period of my medical procedures and things, I had to choose which one is more value to me, and it became about survival. I got a new job. I got to go to work. Hey y'all, I'm here. And it was about, understanding that, thank God I had a job, because I could afford to order, and I could afford to order something that's grilled instead of fried, or I could afford to order a salad instead of just the dollar menu fries. Thank God I had a job.
Right.
But imagine those who are battling, which do I choose? Right. And they don't have so many options, or they don't have so much support, or they don't have the resources. I want to ask you, have you seen food from this perspective really impacting your own health? And have you considered, how food has impacted your health?
I'm considering it now.
Okay.
Without going into any real depth at this moment. I have been advised by some people to get off of all medications and focus on my food. I'm scared to do that.
Yeah.
I'm scared to do that. But I'm considering it. Because I really do believe that whatever diseases, I believe in a God. And so for those of you who believe in a God, I really do believe that whatever diseases are natural in our environment, God gave us a natural cure for them. We just got to find it. We got to go back to those old, they called them witch doctors.
Sangoma.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to say that witch doctor sounds really, really, really negative, but
Root doctor.
To the root doctors that understood how nature provides its own cures. So and I apologize.
No, you're good.
No,
you're good.
I think food is our medicine, and I've gone to extremes. I've been, it's over 20 years. I've been, vegetarian / vegan, right? And there's times when I was like all raw, or I ate only fruit. I tried different things, right? And I think there's a balance into it all, but I really do feel that like food is our foundation, you know, and I have gotten caught up too much in fast food lately because of ripping and running and this, that, and the other, you know what I mean? Or just eating out. I don't know if it's fast food per se, but still, like how I think our biggest thing is understanding like the power that we have to choose what we put into our body and how that impacts. It has outcomes. You know what I mean? And making that connection and then having that self-determination, right? And then like that's probably why I think the market is so valuable, right? Is that like it gives options, and for people who sometimes we don't have options, if you don't have transportation or we're limited in time, you know. So yeah, I think food plays a huge impact, you know. And it's something that you said earlier about like work. And I think COVID kind of brought it out, is that like who were the majority of people that had jobs labeled as essential, you know, and you know, which pretty much was lower income jobs, right? And so it's like, you know, the jobs that, you know, weren't worth, you know, $15 an hour and this, that before are now considered essential. You know what I mean? Like, oh, this whole thing's gonna fall apart if we don't have people working, you know, grocery stores for one, or wherever. You know what I mean?
Or driving the trucks to bring.
100%, right? And so it's like, but the essential workers are the ones that have less time to be able to take care of themselves. They have less time to be able to even think of some of the higher, broader implications, right? Because like, you know, if you're struggling to provide your basics, then you can't have time to think about the loftier things that are happening in society, or even connecting my lived experience to policy and structure.
Absolutely.
You know, and so, but yeah, I do think food is a key. Go ahead.
No, because we will be here all night.
Well, I wanna say, you know, thank you both for your insight, your expertise, your willingness to bring your voice. I believe that the two of you hold such powerful and influential voices in the community, and you would be it would do you well to connect into these powerful voices by connecting with Gem City Market, by connecting into the Black Studies program. Go take the classes and learn more information. Get the education in.
The race, was it race?
Yes, take the community. And if you're not going to take the Black Studies program, or go take a sociology or Black Studies class from Amaha, or take a Black Studies or African history or survey of Africa class from Dr. Thornton, you could definitely take the free community classes. The race and the law class is happening right now on Thursdays with Myla Cardona Jones. The race and history 1619 and beyond class that Dr. Thornton taught went amazing and will be back again.
Yeah, I haven't taken it. I'm looking forward to it.
In the spring. It'll be back again in the spring. There will be more things rolling out, more series rolling out from YW.
Psychology,
including race and psychology, and hopefully to include race and sociology. And we can bring those here to the community. And so those are ways you can get more education. And if you want to get active, you want to get activated, you want to get your hands on to the problem and make a change, Amaha, how can members of this community get involved to impact food apartheid right here in Dayton?
Yeah, I was, a couple of different ways. I think, being more informed, like learning more about the issues. Like to me, like the market is also a catalyst for community. So joining the market and helping out in the market is another way to help with the larger community transformation. I think there's community gardens. Even the thing we really didn't talk about much about is urban agriculture, right? How like people are now like making their living off of farming in urban environments, right? And so to realize that it really is an economy and how to build and that up. And I would say ultimately to me, it's committing to being rooted in love.
Yeah.
And what that means in the fullness, and how to see each other as humans and how to give, grace and unmerited favor, and being committed to love, because, like King says, agape love is community, right? And so it's like how, like I believe community is possible, in the fullest sense of the word. And so to me, it's like, how do I live out that love amongst my community that I would like to receive myself? And in that process, we shift the dynamic, right? And so it's not about like outshining somebody else, but like how like your light, helps my light shine, and vice versa, and everybody in this room, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like how we realize that it's a collective light that we're trying to emerge right now, and a new experience, because an alternative space is emerging, right? And so, and you can reach out to me, you can reach out to Dr. Lewis. Taylor, I'm so proud of you and all the amazing work that you're doing, and for creating these spaces, having these conversations, and
thank you for inviting me.
yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you
Yeah.
for being here.
Thank you.
I'm so grateful that y'all were here today. Thank you for those of you in the audience who came in person and shared space and shared your time and invested in how you could be a part of the community. These dialogues are so important, and we look forward to them every fourth Monday. We'll be excited to see our last one of the year next month, December, the fourth Monday of December. We will have our last Gem City Earth Tones of the year, but we are excited for it. We'll be talking about education. School bells will be ringing, and we're very excited.
Oh, wow.
Thank you again for joining us on YW Mission Moves. And again, I'm your host, Taylor Curtis, and I am so happy that you joined us today. We will see you next time on Gem City Earth Tones.
Peace.
Amen.